Hey everyone, this is Alan. Welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. Before we get started today, I just have a quick question for you. Are you looking for an online practice management software to help you grow and manage your business? If your answer is yes, then we think Jane could be a great fit for you. With features like online booking, scheduling intake, one-on-one telehealth built into the EMR with charting, paired with free data transfers from other EMR systems and unlimited free customer support, all at a low cost, about $100 a month, it's really easy to get started with Jane. Head on over to jane.app/physicaltherapy, and from there you can sign up for a live demo of Jane, talk through your questions with a member of the support team who would love to meet you and hear your story. You can also mention the PT on Ice Daily Show when you sign up for a 1-month free grace period to help you in your transition to Jane. Enjoy today's episode of the PT on Ice Daily Show.
Good morning, YouTube. I am going to get Instagram up and running. Good morning, Instagram and YouTube. Welcome to PT on Ice Daily Show for Pregnancy and Postpartum Monday. So my name is Ellison Melrose, and today what I wanted to go over was, I'm a teaching assistant for Pregnancy and Postpartum Edition for clinical management of the fitness athlete. And what I wanted to go over today was something that was pertinent to one of our assignments in our 8-week course. So today is our last meetup for cohort, and our 8-week course. My cat is being silly. She's stuck under the table. They do a modification to programming for their last assignment, and it got me thinking about why we're modifying for the postpartum athlete. So typically, sorry, my cat is being crazy. It's Monday morning here. So there are some reasons that we modify, and I want to talk about them today. But before we get into that, I wanted to go over some of the upcoming courses for our live. So we had our first live course in Hendersonville, Tennessee last weekend, and we have another one coming up in March at Onward Greenville, March 26th and 27th. We are going to be hopping out west to Onward Denver, April 24th and 23rd. And then we're going to go up to Bellingham, Washington, May 21st and 22nd. And then we have a couple other courses coming to you June through October of the year. So we have about one a month until the end of the year so far. So if you guys are interested in getting into that course, please join us. It was a blast. And our next 8-week online course starts today. There might be a few extra spots, so go ahead and head on over to ptonice.com if you wanted to join us. So that would be great. So the why for postpartum modifications, and then we're going to tie it into modifications for 22.1 that hopefully y'all are participating in this weekend with the CrossFit Open. So there are 4 to 5 reasons why we want to, what we want to consider for modifications for the postpartum athlete. And what we see typically or historically is that people are modifying during pregnancy just because they are pregnant and not really giving a reason why. So that's what we're here to do with clinical management of the fitness athlete, is why we're making those modifications. And so on the other end of the spectrum, when people are coming back to exercise postpartum, we want to make sure we have guidelines in place and the athlete is aware of why we're making those modifications. The modifications seem arbitrary. A lot of our athletes may just ignore them. They may not want to listen to them saying, well, why am I allowed to do X and she told me not to do Y, right? So we're going to go over some of those considerations now. So the first one is going to be time since delivery, right? So 2 different types of delivery, and we want to be respectful of those tissue healing guidelines when we're coming back postpartum. What early exercise prior to that 6-week appointment can help facilitate is it can help promote that tissue healing. It can encourage blood flow, prevent deconditioning from some of those early stages of postpartum when we're in the rest and recovery. And we can also facilitate some early core training that is required for caring for newborns. So we want to respect those tissue time or tissue healing times, but we also want to try to encourage that early return to exercise prior to that 6-week. So time since delivery is going to be something that we want to consider when looking at some modifications. We also want to think about mode of delivery. So cesarean versus vaginal. Both of those are going to have different considerations based on the tissue trauma that occurs. So with a vaginal delivery, what we see is the pelvic floor stretches 300% its resting length during a delivery. That's a huge stretch injury. And so we want to be considerate of those tissues while they're healing, and potentially know that some of those, the pelvic floor may be more impacted than a cesarean delivery. So with that, we may see that they may not tolerate some of those impact exercises as early as potentially we could get back to the C-section. And we'll get into the C-section just now. So another consideration for both pregnancies, our anterior wall is going to lengthen pretty significantly. So while it's not the trauma that you see in a C-section, there is still a lot of adjustment that anterior abdominal wall is making during those early stages. And so core stability is still going to be affected with the vaginal delivery as well. So for our C-sections, the incision, it goes through 7 different layers of tissue. And while it seems pretty standard, sometimes we hear it happen a lot. Sometimes they can be unplanned C-sections, and a mom may have gone through hours of trying to deliver vaginally prior to having a C-section. So that's another consideration with our C-section, is that it may not have been planned. And so with that, we may have some pelvic floor trauma that also experienced during that delivery. So it might not be as streamlined as we think with C-section. It may not only be the anterior abdominal wall that we are concerned about, but thinking back into the exercise postpartum, if they didn't have that trauma pelvic floor, they may be able to tolerate going back to impact a little bit sooner than what we would think. And so typically we hear this 12-week postpartum for return to impact. Again, it's kind of arbitrary. There's not a ton of research showing that is what should be done. And so we can play with pushing those boundaries a little bit up to tissue tolerance, right? Or up to the athlete's tolerance. So we have time since delivery, mode of delivery, and then we want to think about how many babies were born, right? So what that can affect, it's going to affect belly size, right? So the more babies, the bigger the belly, and so more modifications potentially had to be made during. And it can also, you may see some earlier deconditioning with those with multiple pregnancies as well, because they had to stop doing some exercises later in pregnancy. With triplets particularly, it is a precaution, contraindication for exercise during the third trimester. Again, this is something that, we're looking into the research of why those recommendations were made, but those are the recommendations that are given. And so we will see those athletes potentially more deconditioned. So going back to their exercise postpartum, it can be more challenging than, say, just a single birth. Time, mode, number of babies delivered, and then we want to think about their prior skill level. So with our athletes, what were they doing before? What were they doing during pregnancy? And that can give us an idea of what they can get back to postpartum. So we want to have that discussion with our athletes, especially if we're seeing them during pregnancy. So with that, our exercise level during pregnancy plays a huge role, but we want to be aware of some reasons why, or some complications during pregnancy that may have led to them not being able to exercise. So for example, hyperemesis, gravidarum is pretty uncomfortable. Pretty much they have the flu the entire pregnancy. And so that may be something that if your athlete has experienced that, they may not have been able to exercise their entire pregnancy. So those are typically what we want to take into consideration when we're giving our modifications for our postpartum athlete. Time since delivery, mode of delivery, number of babies that were present, prior skill level, and their exercise during pregnancy, and any other complications that could have occurred during pregnancy. So with those, we want to also be giving our athletes some guidelines with the return to exercise. Because if we give them that autonomy, then they can make the decision, or they can be informed about why we are making these modifications and what to look out for. And it can be really empowering for those athletes. So we want to, some symptoms that they may want to look out for in order to regress their exercises is going to be pelvic pain, sorry, my cat, incontinence. So incontinence will look like either urinary leakage, passing of gas, or some fecal leakage as well. So those are all different types of incontinence. Pelvic heaviness, any excessive vaginal bleeding or increase in vaginal bleeding, and excessive coning or doming, or difficulty maintaining that core anterior wall with some of the higher level exercises. So this can empower things, and reminding them that one of those symptoms along the way, or multiple of those along the way, they're not doing permanent damage, and it's not the end of the world. We have those guidelines to make that regression and go from there. So we want to not instill fear in these athletes when they're getting back to what they love to do. So with all of that, so I am currently 8 weeks postpartum, and I did 22.1 on Friday, and it was awesome. It was one of my first exercises where I was able to do without a ton of modifications. So that's what I want to go over today, is kind of what that could look like for a postpartum athlete, and what considerations that this workout has. So not a ton of high skill level with this with this workout. So not any high level gymnastics that they're unable to get back to. The biggest concern for me was going to be the 15-minute time domain. It's long. It's long. You're moving the whole time, and my endurance or your athlete's endurance may be not up to par where they want it to be. And so what you can do with that 15-minute time cap or time domain, you can go into it with them and choose how many rounds or how many how many rounds they want to try and get through in that 15 minutes. Divide that up, and then you have a time for how long it should take each round, right? So you're dividing that equally so that you're setting ahead of time instead of in the moment. So, for example, if an athlete wanted to do 6 rounds during that 15-minute time domain, it'd be 2.5 minutes per round. What you can do is you can have them assess that along the way at that 10-minute mark. If they have a lot left in the tank, allow them to push it for the last 5 minutes, or make those modifications from there. The next, what we have is those handstand walks. So the biggest consideration for handstand walks is going to be core stability. It's pretty core intensive. And so some of your athletes, if they're returning post C-section, if they were unable to get back to some of those higher level core exercises, they may have, but again, it's not going to harm anything if we're trying to do that. So the next we have is the dumbbell snatch. So this is great. I loved doing this. It was super fun. Again, felt really empowered during this workout. What we could see is that your athlete may have the tendency to Valsalva during the movement, particularly if they're fatigued. So what you will want to coach them through with this movement is breath work. And that's a theme throughout this whole workout. So you want to breathe, right? So exhaling with the overhead movement, inhaling while returning the weight back down can be a good breath cue for that dumbbell snatch. Allowing them and giving them, acknowledging that if they need to pause and reset at the bottom of the snatch, that is okay. And then the scaled version of 22.1 has a great scaled weight. So dropping it down to 20 pounds is a great place to start for our athletes as well. Last one is box jump overs. So the movement standard this year actually was in favor for the postpartum athlete with the step down. So a lot of times we see with that jumping down back into the box jump, that is where the impact is the greatest, and we could see some incontinence at that stage or other pelvic floor symptoms. So it's actually helpful that we had the movement standard of having to step down. And so again, jumping up may not be symptom provoking for your athlete. And so that could be fine. Again, pacing yourself with the 15 repetitions. If they're not as tolerant to that impact, stepping up, which is one of the scaled options, stepping up and over is a great modification, and it's still going to get that intended stimulus of increased cardiovascular demand that 22.1 was looking for. So with all of that, what I want you to do is think about when 22.2 comes out, what that might look like for the postpartum athlete, depending on their mode of delivery and time since delivery, all those things. What type of modifications may we have to make for that athlete? So if you guys have any questions about this or have anyone that you want to perform or do the 22.2 and not sure where to get started with your modifications, go ahead. You can comment down below or DM any of us for that, and we can help you out. I hope you guys have a good Monday and have a good rest of the week.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.